is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He surprised me one day by telling me the movie Sorcerer had nothing to do with sorcerers, Stu Horvath.
It's so disappointing, right?
It's an incredible movie, though.
It is. It's so good. But, like, if there was, like, I don't know, some sort of pact with the devil or, you know, incantations.
Yeah, this is the thing that freaking made right after The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And, like, it's just as harrowing in its own way.
I don't think that there's a tenser movie out there. I think that it hits a certain point and then you think, oh my God, like, how is this movie so like having a panic attack, and then it keeps ratcheting it up somehow. And you're just like, how is this happening?
Yeah, it honestly makes no sense at the very onset of the movie. Like, you're watching it, you're like, in the beginning, doesn't feel like it connects to the end, but it does in a big way. And holy crap, like, it's an hour and a half of you just sitting there on the edge of your seat, like, uncomfortably nervous.
Yeah, and it feels like an ordeal, like a 3-hour, 4-hour movie, but I don't think it's anywhere near that.
Yeah, it's a slog. It is a slog, and there's like such a release when you get done with it. But I think like the word sorcerer is painted on one of the trucks, and that's
one of the truck's names.
Yeah, it's about what we get. But anyway, Stu, what are we talking about today?
Well, it's not a truck. It's a book called The Sorcerers Enclave by Aaron Howdle.
Oh, nice.
Published by Square Hex, which I believe are the folks who print the Black Hack.
Oh, cool.
So every once in a while, I see a book, and you know that they always say, like, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
That's a lie. You should always judge a book by its cover. The book cover is they're designed to be judged. The book cover is telling you everything you need to know about the book, in theory.
You only get one shot, dude. Like, if you look at that book cover and that book cover doesn't put a little pep in your party parts, then you are not picking that book up.
Yeah, I've definitely passed on books that I want to read because the book cover's crummy. What would people think if I was reading this? I say to myself, because that's the important thing about reading books, is what people think of you.
Of course.
But no, what I mean by this is sometimes I encounter a book and I just see the cover and I know that that is a book for me. And like it isn't just like, oh, I think I will enjoy reading that book. It's like I see some books and I'm just like, oh man, I'm going to fall into this book and I'm going to be obsessed with it for a period of time. The most recent one that I can think of, they're hard to remember because a lot of the time I just envelop these books so completely that I forget that there was a time before them. But I think the most recent one was probably Vermis. Like I saw the cover. Yeah. And I was just like, I need this. I would stop at nothing to get it as soon as possible. And as soon as it gets here, I'm going to devour it and think about it and like try and convince everyone I know to pick up a copy because it's just that good. And that's basically the same thing that happened with Sorcerers Enclave. I saw that Tefrotic Nightmare came out on Exalted Funeral. And I was just like, I want to buy that. So I go to Exalted Funeral. And as I do, I basically go to what's new, and then I look until I see something that I already bought from Exalted Funeral. I go through all the pages and I like fill my cart up with the things that look interesting. So I got Tefrotic Nightmares, and I got the Corny Gron books, which are cool. We'll do a show on them soon too. But then I saw Sorcerer's Enclave, and I was just very much like, ooh, what's this? And boy, it got here. And like I read about what it is, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. But it got here, and I was just like, "Oh, I got it." It's 48 pages, and I like read it immediately, and it like knocked me on my butt. It's just a fantastic book. So what it is a 48-page book. It's that's interesting. I guess it is A4 or whatever the English equivalent of A4 is, which is I think a little smaller. But it seems like a smaller book than it is. It's a systemless sort of art book about an island where sorcerers live and work. Some immediate inspirations are apparent. Like obviously the idea of an enclave of mages on an island immediately reminds me of Earthsea, but then the artistic approach, which is black and white, very cross-hatchy art with an emphasis on the gritty little details, and the font usage and the layout is very, 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 very much like Warhammer Fantasy circa 1989. It's so like, but without, actually like being that. There's enough stylistic stuff that's different, that I think it differentiates itself really nicely while still sort of paying homage to the old hammer.
And I guess that is the true translation, homage without filing the serial numbers off.
Yeah, he's not hiding it. There's a whole approach to like there's border art, like frames that are very much in line with like maybe not just, old hammer, but fighting fantasy. And it's just like this guy, it looks like his line work isn't nearly as heavy as Russ, but John Blanche has this sort of light and airy pencily look to his inks often. And I think that Howdle is sort of akin to that, but like lots of detail, lots of like twisted branches and gnarly bits. And so the thing about this, it's just so good. I love two things from my childhood. I love books that had cross sections. So like or cutaways. I mean, I didn't have a book of Star Wars cross sections because I don't think they existed yet. But like my kid has books where like they'll like have a Star Destroyer cut in half, and you can see like all the people walking around.
Oh, it's the best. Yeah,
and it's very much like a dungeon sort of scene in profile. I love those, and I love finding books. Particularly the third volume of Where's Waldo is pretty good because like that's the one that has the fantasy elements in it. But I like cluttered, maximalist art like that where it's just so much to look at, and that invites you to kind of play a game with just the art. I think that even without the instructions of Where's Waldo, I think that you look at those pictures and you just want to like create narratives with them or play little mental games with them naturally without even being directed to. And there's something very similar going on here because basically the book is one gigantic illustration of the cross section of the fortress that's on this island. It comes with a very large poster map of the full illustration, and then basically each two-page spread has the fortress in silhouette. And then the one room that he's talking about in this spread sort of lit up with a detail of it on one page and a little bit of colorful language describing the purpose of the room and what's going on in the picture. And he goes room by room. So like the first one is actually outside. It's the Druid's Way, and there's a little druid, hanging out with his standing stone. And then there's the natural arts, which is like folks who don't really embrace the druid religion, but still like the real world and the natural order of things. And then there's a dueling pit where battle mages, pit elementals against each other. And then there's the construct factory and the alchemy lab and the library. There's an orrery, of course. There's a gate room. The master of potions has his own little wing of the building. And then of course there's the necromancer has his own little tower, and there's trouble a brewing. And it all plays out in the illustrations, and they're all like hyper detailed, and it's just there's no mechanics at all. It's just a little bit of lyrical prose and beautiful illustrations. But like I get this book, and it's really no different from like 1,000 Islands.
Okay.
Like I could take this and without too much trouble turn it into a scenario, and I have the maps right there. They're honestly more evocative than top-down maps for your typical role-playing adventure maps. There's very little standing between this sort of lyrical art book becoming a role-playing scenario. And even if you don't use it, part and parcel for a scenario in which you have to deal with the necromancer uprising at the mage school, which sounds pretty cool.
Over the plate, sure.
Yeah. You could just use each room is just like it's so jam-packed with details. Like if you have an alchemist in your game, you have his workshop right here. And it's a useful handout. If you need a magical observatory, now you have an illustration that you could use for player reference and kind of look at that illustration and get further inspiration for what you need for your game. It's great. It's just one of those things that like there's not much more to say about it, but like it does everything that it sets out to do, and it does a gorgeous job of it. And like I don't know. I spent an hour reading it, and I'm gonna go back to it over and over and over again to look at the pictures. It's just so good.
I mean, some books are just nice to read.
Yeah.
And I think that is something is often understated in the hobby. is that while everything can be a source book, not everything needs to be a source book, you know?
Yeah.
Like you take like a little inspirato, little idea here and there, and then just have something, which is I think also a rarity in the hobby, that you could put out on a coffee table and kind of just keep like thumbing back to and like looking through and maybe finding something new every time you go into and thumb through and look at. And I love that. I love that kind of stuff. I think that's like, the kind of thing I get out of a lot of like Max Moon stuff and some other creators that I like, where it's just like it's absolutely useful on many levels. It's a tool like any other in your arsenal, but it's also like you pop that out on a table and people are gonna be like, "Ooh, what's this?" Eyes are immediately drawn to it, and you kind of want to know more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like the dirty little secret of role-playing game collectors is that, like, of course we don't play all of the games, but like we just like reading them. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's nice to have a book that is clearly like a role-playing book in its soul, but has no pretense of being mechanical in any way.
Amazing.
And is still entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny though, because looping back to something you said in the beginning, like about like, we're talking about the covers of the books, like drawing you in. I often think, and I think a lot of people agree with me when I say that, when you look at people who like bands, right? There's a certain tribalism to wearing the t-shirt, like Iron Maiden fans, right? If you see a dude walking around in an Iron Maiden t-shirt, you throw the irons up, they're gonna throw it back at you, or like you'd be like, oh man, it's an awesome t-shirt. You'd be like, oh thanks, bro. And like you kind of could possibly make a friend,
Yeah.
It's kind of different with books. Like if you're in a cafe somewhere and you're reading a book, like you see someone reading a book with a cool cover, you're like, oh damn, that cover looks good. But it's not the same kind of experience because that person is reading.
Yeah, you don't want to interrupt them.
You don't want to interrupt them. They don't want you to interrupt them. There's a reason why they have like a nice little cup of tea and a book. They're in a sunbeam. It's their time. Don't interrupt their time. Steve, do you have any final thoughts on this thing here?
Pick it up, man. And this was apparently originally a Kickstarter project. So when you get the book, you get all of the Kickstarter ephemera with it, the poster maps, and a set of postcards. And the book itself is really nice, but I don't usually think that like, oh, hey man, I got a poster that's folded up, like whoopee, like records constantly putting posters in there, and it's just like that's just taking up space. But in this case, I really appreciate having the art, full size and together and legible. It's a really impressive thing, and I love the idea of just like going at one big piece of paper, filling it with a cool image, and then turning it into a book like this is just an interesting process thing. Really cool stuff from Aaron Howdle, and I'm excited for him to do more.
Very cool. Well, there's been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG podcast. Stu, where can the people find you on the internet?
They can find me on vintagerpg.com. You could bet your butts that I'm going to post about this next year, and it'll be right there. And while I got you, there's an Ennie thing. The Ennie Awards. Have you heard about these awards, Hambone?
I've heard, pray tell.
Yeah, they're awards for role-playing games and associated items. And they happen at this thing called Gen Con, and it's in a couple weeks. I happen to have a thing that was, nicely nominated, and it was nominated along in the RPG related category with a plushie, and I think that this is a win-win situation. Either I win and I get an award, or I lose to a plushie, which is like the funniest story ever.
True.
So I encourage you to go and vote your conscience between me and the orange plushie. It's for experience points, the supplemental zine for the book, Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground. And in all seriousness, it's super cool to be nominated. I'm glad that everybody who worked on it gets to say that they are and Ennie nominated whatever they did for the book. So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man, because at the end of the day, it's not just you,
No, it's definitely not just me.
And it's our friend Ed, which is like, to me, like the cherry on top of the sundae, because I'm sure he was very confused when you told him, Ed, you're an Ennie nominated writer. What?
Yeah, well, because his first thing was like, what's an Ennie?
Yeah.
Did you say Emmy?
Yeah.
So it's very confusing.
Ed's only in the hobby as far as he like plays games. Like, he's so far out on the outskirts of like knowing anything about what the hell's going on, which I think has got to be nice in its own way, Yeah,
I mean, I'm hardly an insider myself, even after all these years. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're inside enough. We get the tea, and that's about as far as we want to go.
Yeah.
However, the zine experience points you can get over at Exalted Funeral.
Yep.
Exalted Funeral, friend of the show. We love them very much. They're just lovely people who really do support the works of so many different independent creators. I've actually been to the warehouse, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of books by a lot of people in this warehouse. So, if you find your way over there, by the time this episode airs, we may have just passed their summer sale, which I'm sure if you listen to this show, you already have your finger on the pulse of that. And I hope you got all the cool stuff that you wanted to get, including their sweet free gifts. But exaltedfuneral.com, boogie on over there, get experience points. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, want to become a patron, patreon.com/vintagerpg. We have a behind the scenes look at the stuff Stu's working on, the behind the scenes stuff that I'm working on. I'm about to post some more stuff about Brain Eaters and hopefully the Hotel Exorcist soon. We've got a killer Discord community that is just an oasis from the rest of the world and social media that we'd love for you to be a part of. Early release episodes at some point on like Friday or Saturday, depending on when Stu and I record them. But now we're actually recording on a Sunday, so you will probably get them on a Friday. And it's just a cool place to hang out. $10 tier gets you in on Stu's West Marches game. The $5 tier gets you in on whatever game I'm running that month. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.